She tried to open her eyes, but she had no strength to lift her sticky eyelids. A feeling of anxiety wrapped her mind with a cold, sticky substance. She made another attempt to open her eyes. A light penetrated the small slit between her eyelids. The light of the evening sun cut her eyes. After several attempts, she finally managed to open her eyes. She was lying in thick grass. Torn leaf-colored clouds hung over her. The wet forest after the summer rain surrounded her from all sides, and it seemed as if the trees surrounded her like the bars of a cage from which she could not escape. She did not know who she was or what she was doing here. Her heavy consciousness was confused and incoherent. Suddenly, a dog barked sharply somewhere nearby. Its bark painfully echoed in her brain. She could not collect her thoughts. She opened her eyes and saw a powerful man resembling a hunter leaning over her and felt the breath of a panting dog near her ear. "Now you won't run away," the man said, and the woman lost consciousness. Through the veil of gray noise, she heard several times the indistinct voice of the man and the barking of the dog, but she did not care anymore. She woke up suddenly from the pain in her whole body and dizziness. She was lying on a huge tree branch, tied to it, and the man dragged this branch behind him, gripping it with his large hands. There was a dog next to her, which watched her closely. It was drizzling. There was mud everywhere. It was already dark when they reached some house in the forest. He untied her and carried her to an old homemade wooden bed with a modern mattress, which looked very strange. Then the man threw some firewood into a large iron stove and put some water in an iron vessel without handles, similar to a can, on top of the stove. She could not think and just watched him. It distracted her from the all-encompassing pain. This man was unfamiliar to her. He was about 50 years old. Tall, slightly stooped, of strong build. Curly black hair with a slight grayness fell on his cheekbones. Small, deeply set eyes under thick overhanging eyebrows were almost invisible. He seemed to her a nervous and angry man. She struggled to raise her hand and dropped it on her stomach and felt something sticky. She realized that blood was oozing through something wrapped around her torso. Now, on the bed, when she did not feel the cold rain, she felt a fever in her whole body and lost consciousness again. The dog woke her up, poking its nose into her ear. Memories flashed before her eyes of how she lay in the forest during the rain and a stranger brought her to this old, but still strong house. His words, "Now you won't run away," surfaced in her mind. Who is he? Why am I here? Why did I run away from him? She wanted to get up, but pain pierced her back and chest. The dog growled. The woman thought, "I see, the dog guards, so that I do not run away." She tried to remember what had happened to her, but her memories crumbled and flew by somewhere nearby, but she could not grasp even a single fragment of memory. The man came back after a couple of hours, silently dropped his old dirty rubber boots and changed into equally worn sneakers and went to the old buffet in the corner of the room. He rummaged in it for a long time and finally found something. Approaching her, he silently poked something into her hands. It was a round mirror and a plastic comb. She looked at herself in the mirror and could barely say that her own face was familiar to her. It was amnesia. While she lay slowly studying her own face and combing her hair, he casually laid out food in bowls. It was canned beans and pieces of chicken breast. She did not want to eat. She was more tormented by the question of what had happened to her, who this man was. She felt cornered, oppressed, and kidnapped. However, she decided to eat a little, not to arouse suspicion. She understood that she was completely dependent on him. Then he sat down on a homemade stool, which creaked under his weight, and asked her, "Shall we talk?" His voice was strong and squeaky. Only now she began to remember that he was that blurry spot that haunted her from time to time, while someone persistently fed her broth, herbs, and pills. She nodded her head silently. "Lucy, tell me what happened." His words burned her. "My name is Lucy," she thought. "At least he can help me remember who I am." He felt her gaze on him and added, "Why did you run away? What happened to you?" "I don't remember anything." She lowered her eyes and began to examine his hands. These hands were not the hands of a person who does a lot of physical work. Thoughts continued to buzz and swarm like a swarm of bees in her head. Who is he? Why is he here? What does he want from me? He keeps me captive, and that's why I ran away? How did I get here? Her voice trembled. How long have I been here? You've been here for about a week. The first time we met in the forest, you came out to my fire. At night, by yourself. Do you remember that? No, Lucy answered guiltily. I don't remember. She felt her strength leaving her, dizziness returned. He noticed it. Your wounds are shallow, but a lot of bruises, a sprain on your right leg. You walked in the forest for several days without food and you weakened. I always have medicine in my first aid kit, and I treated you without your consent. We'll continue the conversation next time. Eric creaked. He got up sharply and went outside. She heard him talking to his dog about something. Her thoughts were swirling and they were frightening. Different assumptions, fear, a looming sense of uncertainty. Lucy decided that if she had run away from this man the first time, there must have been good reasons for that. She started to think about escaping again, but she did not know where she was, what state it was, and how far away was any village with communication so that she could call 911 or at least a road. She needed a map first. Lucy did not know if the man had a cell phone or a navigator, but hoping to steal such an important item unnoticed would be madness. Lucy had a feeling that they were not alone in this dense place and that she needed to find someone. She did not know why she was so sure of this, but she knew it was true. So she decided to ask where they were in the next conversation. The next 2 days, waking up in the morning, she did not see Eric. He went somewhere, but the dog always stayed at home. She understood that the Rottweiler dog only seemed peaceful and friendly. The dog was called King. Overcoming the pain, Lucy sat on the bed and quietly and gently called the dog to her. She hoped to somehow befriend the dog so that it would let her go. The dog did not pay attention to Lucy. Lucy got up with difficulty, limping, made a few steps, but did not approach King closely. Finally, holding her side, Lucy tried to get closer to the door, but King started to growl. Eric left while Lucy was sleeping, leaving near her some jam, crackers, cookies, tea and 2 white pills, and returned before lunch, fed the dog, then gave food in cans for Lucy, and then ate himself. He was thoughtful and taciturn, and only when he went out with the dog to the street he always talked to King for a long time. At such moments, Lucy realized that the dog and this man were one. The next day Lucy felt better and she tried to get up and walk around the room. She also studied the surrounding things to somehow understand where she was and who this man was. Lucy did not find any personal belongings of Eric that would shed light on who he was and what he was doing here. And the black shoulder bag, which could contain such things, Eric always carried with him. In this large room there was another small door, and where it led, Lucy did not know. This wooden unpainted old door beckoned her to it. She imagined that there she would surely find the clue she needed. But in the morning King lay all the time on his mat near this small door and as if enchanted waited for his master. Now, when she felt better, choosing the moment when Eric walked with his dog near the house, she boldly approached this door. The door was not locked. The room was small, dark, and smelled of dust. Looking around, Lucy saw shelves on all the walls and they were filled with boxes, cans, packages of products. On a separate shelf were various survival items, including a Geiger counter, a gas mask, an old astrolabe, a compass. Suddenly behind her back she heard Eric's voice. "Are you hungry?" Eric's voice sounded like a creak of a rusty door. "No, I just looked," Lucy justified herself like a child. She did not know what to do and hurried out of the room and returned to her bed. Eric went into the pantry with the products, rummaged a little and took out a small bag with roasted almonds and a bar of chocolate and threw it on her bed. She was surprised not by his generosity, not by the barely noticeable smile on his face, not by his calmness, but by the amount of products in this small room. Probably, not far from the house there is a populated area with a store. But who is Eric hiding from? What is he doing here? Maybe he is a criminal who is hiding from the law. Maybe he is not alone here. Maybe he has accomplices. But what does he want from me? Does he want me to remember something, or on the contrary check if I remember something that could compromise him? "We need to talk," Eric said in the morning, getting up from the small sofa made of rough boards and covered with a warm, colorful blanket. I think it's time to take a walk. You're already moving pretty well. Eric smiled again, barely noticeably. But first of all, you will answer my questions. Lucy was waiting for this conversation and she nodded her head affirmatively. We are far from civilization, you and me. We are in the depths of British Columbia, in a valley surrounded by cliffs on one side and a river on the other. The only way to get here is by boat along the river or through steep and dangerous cliffs. Explain to me how a city woman like you managed to get there, where there are no highways, no freeways, no coverage, where there are no roads and even trails. You were alone, you had no camping gear, no food, and you drank water from a stream, as I understood. You came out to me, I fed you. You kept telling me only your name. I waited for you to sleep in my tent. You slept all evening and all night, and I watched over your sleep, but in the morning, when I dozed off, I found that you had run away, despite the fact that it is not safe here because of predators. Maybe you are not alone and wanted to find your friends? Who are they? Why and for where are you here? And what happened to you? I would like you to answer my questions. You say you don't remember. Try to remember something. This whole story seemed so unreal to Lucy. I remember that my name is Lucy. And I remember how I lay under the rain in the forest, and how you found me. Then I remember how you bandaged my wound. She stumbled, some images slipped through her mind, but she could not catch even one of them and they ran away like nightmares. I don't remember about the fire and the tent. She paused and added, I think I ran away and was very scared. That's better. Who did you run away from? I don't remember. It was very scary. Okay. Let me bandage your foot tightly. We need to take a walk. It's not far. He rummaged in a large white plastic box where he kept medicines, took out a new elastic bandage and began to bandage her leg. Lucy became bolder because she felt among the irritation and questions that this stranger really wanted to understand if she remembered how she ended up in this wilderness. This question interested her too. But she was also interested in the question of who this man was and what he was doing here. She asked, and you? How did you get here? He was silent, only finished bandaging and moved away from her and looked into her eyes. Probably for the first time Lucy saw a direct look of these small green eyes under bushy eyebrows. He thought and looked at her attentively and seriously. His gaze made her uneasy. Tell me, if you want, and lowered her eyes to the wide men's sports pants Nike in which she was dressed lately. He moved away from Lucy and through her jeans, carefully washed from blood and dirt. Put on yours, maybe it will help, he said and went outside. King ran after him, but Eric said something to him and the dog obediently lay down in his place. The pain in the spine and in the stomach and near the left hip was tolerable at first. Her leg did not hurt, although after half a kilometer Lucy began to limp. Eric said, Hang in there, we'll be there soon. Although they had to walk a couple of kilometers, Lucy bravely followed him. As they walked, Lucy ate herself up with thoughts. He wants to recreate everything as it was when they met unexpectedly. He cares if I remember or not. Or maybe he is trying to impose on my memory what was not there? Why does he need it? Or does he want to be sure that I don't remember some events? It was a small clearing. Lucy immediately realized by the neatly lined stone fire pit. Eric did everything very carefully and diligently. According to his story, she met Eric here for the first time. He took off his backpack and started to set up the tent. Lucy saw a small carbine. Look, Eric said and waved his hand around. Before you come to me, remember where you came from? Remember at least approximately. It was a dense forest, a flat field or a steep descent? Move aside and approach me from different places. If you feel something, let me know. I'll make a fire, we'll restore everything as it was. Come on, don't stand, try, Eric shouted impatiently at Lucy. Lucy approached the fire several times, but felt nothing. Eric, looking at her face, which did not express emotions, made her approach again and again. Lucy limped and her head was spinning again. After unsuccessful attempts, he sat her down by the fire, gave her a mug of hot tea and a piece of dried meat with bread and began to ask, What is your name? Hesitating, she answered. Lucy. Pausing, he asked the same question, but more demandingly. What is your name? My name is Lucy. No, you just repeated it, because I told you so. What is your name? Lucy, Lucy. It went on like this several times. Then he nodded his head and ordered. Enough. Rest. He poured himself a metal mug of tea and held it for a long time, clasping the mug with his hands. They sat silently and watched the burning and crackling logs. There was silence. Suddenly his squeaky voice broke the silence. I spend 2 months here every 5th summer. I am a lichenologist. I study rare species of lichens. This is a wild and picturesque place, remote from civilization. This is the perfect place to immerse yourself in the atmosphere and relax from the daily routine and escape from the city bustle. As they say, I combine the useful with the pleasant. There are no roads here. You can't get here by car. There is no communication, and I don't use satellite. How did they bring things here? Products? Lucy wondered. On this side of the mountain, and on the other a dense forest. The forest ends with a cliff. This is the river bank. In a month, my colleagues will come by motorboats, bring everything necessary and products as well. They will rest for a week and we will leave this place until next year. Near the house, there is a descent to the river. There is a more gentle place. There is a boat on the shore, but it is old and in terrible condition. Don't try to run away, you'll drown. Better try to remember what happened to you. In the morning, as before, she was under the supervision of King. And after lunch, Eric allowed her to go out and walk near the house while he walked and played with his dog for a long time. They did not accept her into their company. Eric still did not trust her completely. Although her attitude towards him changed a bit after the conversation by the fire, but periodically she asked herself who she was and what had happened to her and why she ran away from him. One day Eric came very excited. Lucy felt it from the moment he crossed the threshold. He, without explaining anything, said that after lunch they had a small walk. Eric left the dog at home again, although King was looking forward to the walk. She understood that something had happened and it was somehow connected with her. They came almost to the same place, only closer to the rocky foot of the cliff. He pointed to a stone with dark spots, apparently from blood, and began to question Lucy. Did you go up along those pines? Remember, then you fell here from that cliff? He pointed to the cliff. And this is your blood. Did someone push you? You fell in the bushes with thick grass. It saved your life. Lucy stood shocked. No. I mean, I don't remember. I was up there. There are also traces of blood. We'll go up there. He took out a piece of rope and asked to unbutton the jeans button at the waist. Lucy found it disgusting, but she decided to obey. He tied her around the waist with a rope, passing the knot through the loop of the jeans, the other end tied to himself. He told her to hold onto the rope with her hands. Eric was strong and corrected with the rope so that she did not roll down. Although Lucy already walked almost without feeling pain, her hip began to hurt when climbing. Eric pulled her to the platform he pointed to from below. A densely overgrown place with grass, where several pines grew in a rocky cliff down. Not giving her a chance to rest, he parted the thick grass with his hands and showed what was on the grass, small stones and soil, dark dried spots. Not giving her a chance to breathe and figure something out, he asked, "Well, what do you say, Maria?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Maria?" "I'm Lucy." Eric showed her a driver's license. "Then explain to me whose driver's license is this?" "I found them here. They are all in blood. But in the photo a woman who looks like you has 2 drops of water and her name is Maria. So who are you, Lucy or Maria? Tell me." "Eric, let me see the photo," she asked in a strained voice. He brought the document to her face, but did not give it to her hands. She looked at the photo. "Similar. Maybe it's me." "Eric, I don't remember." She grabbed her head, buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed bitterly. Eric did not expect this. He stood silently and waited for her to cry. Some time passed, the sobs subsided. Sniffling, Maria pulled away from his shoulder. "Forgive me, Eric. Thank you for everything. I will try to remember." I will remember." He sighed and gently patted her on the shoulder, soothing. They returned to the house in silence. Maria realized that this man was as important as her to understand who she was and why she was here. They had not entered the house when suddenly the dog pricked up his ears, hearing something outside, and began to growl quietly. Eric, grabbing a carbine, headed out with King and turned to Maria. "Lock the doors and don't let anyone in." "No one, understand?" Eric shouted in his hoarse voice, sternly looking into her wide-open eyes. She nodded silently, her heart beating faster. When the door closed, Maria ran to the door on numb legs and locked it. She sat with a petrified face for a while on a stool. Hearing some sound outside, either birds or a crunch of a branch, Maria flinched, jumped off, and wanted to look out of the small window with an iron grate. However, she noticed on the table a flat black bag that Eric always carried with him. She decided to open the bag and see what Eric kept there. The largest thing was a diary, in which there were records of each day and a description of observations of the growth, development, and distribution of lichens. An old Sony camera, one of their first digital cameras, with a bunch of photos of different lichens. Several colored liners, simple pencils, a ruler, an eraser, a small bottle of water, an empty school notebook, and her driver's license. She, forgetting that Eric could return and see that she was secretly rummaging through his personal belongings, began to look at her photograph, endlessly studying her surname and name. It was getting dark around, it got cold sharply, and the letters of her surname seemed to fly to meet her, dissolving in space. Various images flashed before her. Maria did not understand how and when she lost consciousness. She did not hear when Eric returned, how he called, knocked, asked to open the doors, threatened to kick her out of the house. After a couple of hours, she woke up on the floor from the cold, where she lay curled up in a fetal position. King heard and barked when she moved the stool, leaning on it to get up. Maria, having suffered a little, pulled out the bolt and Eric opened the doors. She expected Eric to yell at her. However, seeing her sunken pale face with imprints on the skin from the unevenness of the floor, he understood everything. The room was dark and he lit the lamp and saw his bag with his things laid out on the table. His attention was drawn to his open notebook, next to her driver's license. He took the notebook in his hands and began to flip through. On each page there was a drawing of a man's face from different angles, some car, and a huge tourist backpack. On each drawing there was a green folder, and it gave the impression that this was the main element of each fragment of memory. Eric sat on a stool, propped his head with his hands, and began to examine the drawings intently. One drawing attracted him more than others. The man's face was all in blood. "Who is this? Your husband?" She shook her head negatively. "So you ran to him or from him?" Some vague sensations began to suggest to Maria what had really happened. "To him." "Why?" "I thought they found him and killed him." "Who are they? How many of them?" Maria clasped her head with her hands. She barely distinguished the images of memories in her mind. "I don't know. We ran for a long time. They shot and hit him. They wanted to kill him because of the green folder. Mike. His name was Mike. Maybe they killed him and took his body. They are professionals," Mike said. "I was looking for him, wanted to help, because he helped me. But they took him and the folder too. Why did they want to kill you? Or maybe Mike did it?" "No, Mike helped me. He had food, he shared and helped me. He made me go down. Eric, I don't remember anything anymore. I remember that we first drove fast in the car because they were chasing us. And then we ran and ran. They chased us, they drove us like wild animals. Didn't you see the green folder where you found my driver's license?" Mike said that the folder should be handed over to the FBI. He said the folder would save our lives. Eric shook his head. "I only looked around there a little, but we could look for it. I think tomorrow we should go there again and inspect a larger area. If we find any more clues, we can understand what is going on here. In any case, either those who chased you or Mike were here and they could have left some traces. Why do you think so? Maria, the boat disappeared from the shore, so someone was here. It's in bad condition, but it's gone. But a week ago it was. So I'm right to leave the dog with you. And now we need to sleep. I think Mike is alive and has already sailed away. Maybe we should sail away tomorrow too. You already feel better and can withstand this journey of tens of miles. Maria lay down on the bed and covered herself with a blanket. Eric, burying her face in the pillow, Maria said, "One more thing. I think I remember the place where Mike and I hid. It's somewhere on the riverbank. Can we look for him tomorrow?" Eric grumbled something in response. In the morning, Maria heard some sharp sound through her sleep. The dog growled. "What? What is it?" Maria asked in a sleepy voice. Eric pressed himself with a carbine to the wall near the window. "Quiet. It's a shot. Lie on the floor." Maria obeyed. More shots rang out. Then there was silence. After about 20 minutes, the dog started to growl, but Eric ordered him to shut up. Suddenly there was a thud of a stone on the door, as if someone threw a rock from a distance. Eric and Maria flinched, looked at each other, but did not utter a word. They continued to be where they were before. A painfully long hour passed. There was no movement from the window, and no one was visible from the door, although it was not very well visible in the thin gap between the jamb and the door. Eric opened the door and watched King closely. He wanted to go outside and pulled Eric along. The dog showed no signs of anxiety or that he felt a stranger nearby. Eric let go of the dog, and King ran out into the yard. He began to bark invitingly somewhere very close, giving a sign that he had found something important. Eric, holding a carbine in front of him, half-bent carefully stuck out of the house. Looking around, he went out, leaving Maria alone. Maria seemed to have gone through an eternity. After a minute, Maria heard Eric's voice. "Look, do you know him?" Maria came out of the house. A couple of yards from the death wall, where there was no window, lay Mike's corpse. There was a note pressed on him by a stone. "Oh, God, Eric," tears welled up in Maria's eyes. "It's Mike." Eric took the note and gestured Maria to go into the house. Entering the house, he quickly began to close the doors on the bolt. Wiping his hands on a kitchen towel and greedily sipping from a bottle of water, Eric sat down on a stool next to the door and carefully unfolded the sheet. Illuminating with a small flashlight, which they often used, Eric read carefully, then, having read, threw a glance at Maria and again buried himself studying the text. It was clear that he was thinking about something. "What do they want?" Maria asked quietly. Eric looked at Maria carefully. "They want the green folder." "Do you know where it is?" Maria shook her head negatively. Eric smirked incredulously. "Well, of course, very convenient. No memory, no folder, only a corpse by the wall." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes and she burst into tears, almost suffocating from loud sobs. Eric came over and hugged her. "Well, sorry. It's just that everything is not in our favor." Eric stepped back. "It's not time to wilt, we need to get together. Heat up some tea on the alcohol burner and open some canned food." How can you talk about food when next to? Tears continued to flow down Maria's cheeks. Eric's face acquired an impenetrable hard expression. "Listen, I don't want either you or me to get a bullet in the forehead, so now is not the time for nonsense. And you, it seems, have already done a lot of them. So I will give the orders. Take it for granted if you want to survive. Do everything I tell you. Now your reasoning is inappropriate. The king first, and then us. I need to prepare." Eric took his black bag and went to the closet. It was heard that he was sorting through all the things on the shelf with survival items. Maria did everything automatically. She understood that Eric was right, and it was very hard from all this. It seemed to her that time had stopped and all the events had no reality in front of them. Maria wanted to fall asleep, forget and shake off everything, like a bad dream. She sat on the couch, trying to think of something good. Remember something good, remember, she repeated to herself, and from powerlessness tears welled up in her eyes again. Nothing good came to mind, and she tried with all her might to drive away from herself the terrible thing that she had experienced lately. She remembered everything terrible, that she, an adult woman, was helpless in front of this avalanche of terrible events. Suddenly in her memory one terrible event began to stretch after another, the squeal of car brakes, and the feeling of pain from the seat belt, which cuts into the shoulder from the sharp braking, and Mike, who calmed down, gray silhouettes of men who chased them, and the flickering of trees in front of her eyes during the run, and heavy breathing, and a shot, and a scream, and Mike's moan, and again running, rain, and a dog's bark. She did not notice how she fell asleep. Maria woke up on the bed, covered with a blanket. She was still sleepy and did not open her eyes. It seemed to her that music was playing somewhere, and she was slowly dancing to the rhythm of the waltz with someone dear to her. Here he leans over to her and slowly kisses her. It was her wedding, and the dance partner was her husband, George. The picture changed. Here he is happy packing things, finally a long-awaited vacation. We are happy, and we are driving in the car, me, George, and Lucy. The last 5 years for them were crazy, but successful. But now she could exhale. Her company for the second year has moved from monthly losses to net profit, and finally you can go on vacation. Maria insisted on going to Europe, but George categorically did not want to. Maria gave in to her husband because her success was a common success and a common merit. Maria was proud of her husband and was grateful to him for supporting her desire to develop her business. Mary also wanted to thank her assistant Lucy, who diligently did the work with the papers, herself volunteered to perform any assignments, and during this time became an integral part of the team. Even more, she became her faithful friend. All former friends moved to the background because work completely absorbed Maria, and only Lucy was nearby. Lucy was 10 years older, had experience in accounting in a small organization, and was a very pleasant person. Maria told her that George dreams of going somewhere not to the end of the world, where there is no civilization, and enjoy the beauty and silence of nature. This idea delighted Lucy, and she liked it very much. Mary decided that it would be nice to have a friend nearby, when her husband, dreaming of fishing in the mountain rivers, would feed the mosquitoes, and they with Lucy would sit in the hotel restaurant among the high blue mountains and crystal rivers, listen to the birds singing, enjoy the wine, laugh, and chat about anything, just not about work. In the evening she talked about it with George. He reacted indifferently to this proposal. At first he hesitated a little, whether it was appropriate, but then agreed. George prepared for the trip carefully. He made a route, planned stops, studied the weather forecast, called the hotel, sorted through the numbers several times, and made copies confirming the reservation, paid for all the services, and was in a good mood. Maria did not interfere. She had enough troubles. She left her company for the first time, and she needed to prepare her managers for working days and unforeseen situations. In the car, Mary sat either next to George or moved to Lucy in the back seat, and they shared impressions, then changed George behind the wheel. They stopped at the booked hotels, went to restaurants, wandered along the forest paths, visited museums, sunbathed. Time passed easily and pleasantly. Everything went according to George's plan. He thought everything out so well. Maria admired her husband. Lucy was also on top, and when they needed to be alone, she felt it and delicately disappeared. The biggest surprise will be when we arrive at the final point of our route, George repeated from time to time, smiling mysteriously. Oh, this will be a surprise. You will be so surprised, he exclaimed, and then added more calmly. Inaccessible places, wild animals, beautiful fishing, and a beautiful hotel, the only stronghold of civilization in completely wild and untouched by human places. These places really shook Mary and Lucy. The highway turned into a road covered with gravel, and after an hour of driving into the forest, they were like two girls filming everything they saw on video. Mountain views, small rivers, themselves on rocks or near cliffs. And finally they saw the territory surrounded by a high fence with wire on top and massive metal gates. It resembled the territory of a prison or a military base, only branded with the hotel logo. With great enthusiasm, they endured the whole familiar series of formalities when checking into the hotel. The bald man at the registration desk handed out key cards, each guessed his own key card. Maria was given a blue card, and George and Lucy black cards. Mary liked the view from the window. Their room was magnificent. Kissing, they began to sort things out. It so happened that the day of arrival at the hotel was Lucy's birthday, and in the evening they wanted to celebrate this event together. Mary felt confident in her new dress and went into the corridor. At the end of the corridor, she saw the corridor boy, a young athletic guy. He looked attentively at Maria, smiled falsely, and entered the elevator. It seemed that he was watching her on purpose. Shrugging her shoulders, Maria knocked on Lucy's door. The door opened, and on the doorstep she saw Lucy, who was in a bright red luxurious dress. On her neck was a heavy gold pendant in a colonial style with a large ruby stone in the center of the composition. Maria, overcoming herself, pretended that everything was fine. She appreciated Lucy and paid her a good salary. She was upset, not that Lucy had an expensive thing, but that Lucy often complained to her about her fate and lack of money, and Maria helped her for free, including large sums, and every time it was some new problem. The restaurant was chic. George showed her the menu with chanterelles. For 10 years of married life, her husband knew her tastes. Maria loved chanterelles. She immediately tried a piece. George tried to feed her with a spoon, but she refused. They congratulated themselves on arriving at the final point of rest, and Lucy, on her birthday, began to enjoy food and conversations. Suddenly Maria felt unwell and pain in her stomach. The pain was not strong, but it seemed to increase, and Maria decided to return to the room to take some medicine. Maria felt that George and Lucy reacted indifferently to her condition, even looked at each other strangely. She started looking for her key card, and suddenly it turned out that she forgot it in the room. George reluctantly gave her his key card, black. Maria was already walking to the room, leaning on the walls. There was no first aid kit in the room, although she knew they definitely took it on the road. Probably left it in the car. She was feverish, everything was floating before her eyes. She went out into the corridor and saw the same corridor boy again as a couple of hours ago. He looked at her attentively, then he noticed the black key in her hands. "Are you feeling bad?" "Yes, I feel very bad. Could you call a doctor?" The corridor boy nodded and approached her closely and whispered, "Please go into the room and don't say anything." Maria was surprised, but she felt so bad that she decided to obey. The corridor boy held her by the hand. They stood in the doorway so that they were barely noticeable both in the corridor and in the room. The corridor boy continued to whisper, "Listen to me carefully. You have been poisoned. I can save you, but you need to do everything I tell you. No questions. Do you understand everything?" Yes, Maria felt such weakness that she could hardly think. "My husband." The guy grabbed her by the elbow. "That's later, first the medicine. Do only what I order, and don't talk to anyone." He nodded. "I'll leave the room now. You'll take the car keys and this black card that your husband gave you and go down to the garage by elevator. Don't talk to anyone, avoid employees. If you do this, you will live. Do you understand?" "Repeat." "Keys, black card, garage, avoid employees," Maria said with difficulty. The pain in her whole body increased. The corridor boy abruptly let her go, went out into the corridor and clattered his heels on the fire escape. Maria did everything in a fog, as the stranger told her. The elevator doors opened. The corridor boy was in regular clothes. He had a backpack and a syringe in his hand. He ran up to Maria, grabbed her, and instantly injected the contents into a vein on her neck. "Quickly into the car," he commanded, taking the keys and unlocking the car. They got into the car. Driving out of the garage, Maria seemed to see that between two other cars she saw a guard on the floor. It seemed blood was flowing from his head. The guy turned to Maria. "My name is Mike, and you don't even imagine what's going on in this hotel," he said. Maria's head cleared up. "Stop the car," she ordered. "I need to call my husband." "Let's call him right now. Get your phone," Mike replied, and as soon as Maria took out her phone, he quickly grabbed it and threw it out the window. Maria realized that she had been kidnapped. "Calm down, Mike said. "It's necessary. We are still in danger. You haven't forgotten that you were poisoned, have you? How did it happen?" Maria remembered how her husband tried hard to feed her mushrooms. He nodded. "I'll leave the room now. You'll take the car keys and this black card that your husband gave you and go down to the garage by elevator. Don't talk to anyone, avoid employees. If you do this, you will live. Do you understand?" "Repeat." "Keys, black card, garage, avoid employees," Maria said with difficulty. The pain in her whole body increased. The corridor boy abruptly let her go, went out into the corridor and clattered his heels on the fire escape. Maria did everything in a fog, as the stranger told her. The elevator doors opened. The corridor boy was in regular clothes. He had a backpack and a syringe in his hand. He ran up to Maria, grabbed her and instantly injected the contents into a vein on her neck. "Quickly into the car," he commanded, taking the keys and unlocking the car. They got into the car. Driving out of the garage, Maria seemed to see that between two other cars she saw a guard on the floor. It seemed blood was flowing from his head. The guy turned to Maria. "My name is Mike, and you don't even imagine what's going on in this hotel," he said. Maria's head cleared up. "Stop the car," she ordered. "I need to call my husband." "Let's call him right now. Get your phone," Mike replied, and as soon as Maria took out her phone, he quickly grabbed it and threw it out the window. Maria realized that she had been kidnapped. "Calm down," Mike said. "It's necessary. We are still in danger. You haven't forgotten that you were poisoned, have you? How did it happen?" Maria remembered how her husband tried hard to feed her mushrooms. Meanwhile, Mike took out a folded sheet and handed it to Maria. It turned out to be a printout of her dossier. On the sheet were written her surname, name, social security number, address, account status, age, height, weight. The list also marked various details: favorite color, food, entertainment. And at the bottom of them was a line: method of elimination, where among the list of accidental deaths, such as accident, drowning, heart attack, bear attack, there was also food poisoning. Opposite the poisoning column was a mark and a note: salad with chanterelles. A receipt of payment was stapled. Maria glanced over it. The details were correct, as was the time of the operation, since she did it herself. It turns out that she paid for her own death, which could have been done by her husband. And here's another proof. Mike opened the bag, rummaged in the green folder, and handed her a photo. In the photo, apparently taken from a surveillance camera video, were Lucy and the married couple. In the next photo, Lucy and an unfamiliar man stood over the dead woman with glasses of champagne and smiled. "That's what we need the black key card for," Mike said, and showed the fence and sturdy gates ahead. "They only give it to the chosen ones, those who have the right to leave here alive." Mike swiped the card near the sensor. The gate slowly crawled up. In this green folder, Mike pointed to the thick office folder: everything the FBI needs to know to nail these bastards. They have connections at the highest levels. But at least, I already have one surviving witness. Maria shivered. Mike, God, Mike. Mary woke up from her memories. This guy was dead. "Maria, everything is fine. Please, calm down." It was Eric. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. Eric sat on the edge of the bed and put his hand on her shoulder. "We need to plan an escape. We won't last long here. We don't know how many of these people are, but we know what they are capable of. We can try to trick them." They lit an alcohol burner. Eric's plan was simple: to pretend that they were going to get the folder from the secret place but run away. Get to the shore, take a boat, swim to the other side of the mountains, and hide deeper in the forest before they send a chase after them. It is logical to assume that they are being watched, and most likely they have both motorboats and weapons. They decided to take only the essentials. First, they could move faster, and second, if they were being watched, they couldn't show that they had packed things for a long journey. They spread matches, cartridges, polyethylene bags, several knives under their clothes. Eric sighed sadly and moved his notebook, camera, and other accessories from his bag to a bag. He hid the bag so that it would not be found. Then they put water filters, a hatchet, a shovel, clean water, and some high-calorie food in Eric's bag. Before leaving, Eric played a little with his dog, scratched him behind the ear. Maria felt that he was saying goodbye to his best friend. Maria approached Eric closer. Looking at each other, they nodded and left the house. Eric did not lock the door and attached a note gone for the folder to its middle. There was silence. They walked slowly through the forest and they were sure that they were being watched. King was quietly growling from time to time, but Eric calmed him down. They saw the boat before they reached the river. Eric helped Maria get into the boat, moved the dog, but hesitated himself. "Maria, I'll swim next to you. You take the oars and row." Maria objected. The dog was worried. Eric's voice changed. "Sit down," he ordered. "Both of you. Both sit down. The boat won't stand it." Maria and King obeyed. Eric pushed the boat into the water, rearranged his bag so that it was easier to take it, then pushed the boat away from him with force, entered the water, took hold of the side with one hand. Maria began to row with the oars. At first she couldn't do it, but after 5 or 6 strokes, the oars began to listen to her and they slowly sailed. Eric swam next to her. He had a strong physique and it was clear that he could swim far enough. Suddenly Maria noticed some crack in the rocks, which seemed familiar to her. She told Eric about it. Next to them they saw a large stone that cut into the water. Eric let go of his hand and swam to that stone, climbed onto it with difficulty and showed Maria to row to the shore behind the stone. Surprisingly, she succeeded. Eric warned the dog again and pulled King onto the stone, then took the things and helped Maria get out. They turned the boat sideways to the rocks, but there was nothing to tie it to. It was a narrow vertical slit between 2 rocks that went into each other. They squeezed inside. It was a small expansion between the rocks, but they did not see any caves, only a small round hole. But to get further, you had to lie on the stones and crawl. "There, I remember something, but I can't say for sure. We need to go there." She pointed to this narrow passage. Eric quickly squeezed into the hole and disappeared on the other side. He ordered King to stay with Maria and the dog lay down at the passage and waited for his owner. He was gone for a long time and Maria began to worry. She was already going to climb after him, but suddenly Eric's head popped out of the hole. "Good news," he said. "The boat is no longer needed." He got out of the narrow passage. As he walked to the boat, he quickly explained that this was the same mountain where Maria fell, and inside the mountain several passages, one of which leads to the forest surrounding the mountains. This is their secret way out of here. Eric put several heavy stones in the boat, punched a small hole in the bottom and pushed the boat further to the middle of the river. The boat, slowly filling with water, floated further downstream. When they were already ready to squeeze through the narrow passage, Eric said, "By the way, I found something else there." He hesitated a little. "There are some things of Mike's there." On the other side, Maria saw that, apparently, Mike had been here for several days. It seemed that he was hiding for a couple of days. Among the empty cans and wrappers on the ground lay a green folder. Eric gave it to Maria and she clutched it, as if it was a way to resurrect Mike. "We have to go," Eric said. "Do you feel the draft? If we go in the direction of fresh air, we won't get lost." They walked along a winding passage with several branches and came out into a spacious grotto that led directly into the forest from the north side. Suddenly there was a deafening shot and Eric fell on a large flat stone. King immediately ran somewhere ahead. The man was wounded in the chest. Blood quickly stained his clothes. Maria tried to stop it with her hands, then pressed one of the bandages from their bag. Through the passing ringing, she heard King tearing someone with a furious growl. The shooter screamed in pain and begged to kill the dog. A second shot rang out and the growls subsided. Eric stopped breathing, his eyes stopped, his face relaxed. Maria continued to instinctively clamp his wound. She came out of her stupor only when a figure in camouflage and a mask on his face appeared in front of her. The shooter reached out to Maria, pointing to the green folder. Maria tried to take it, but it slipped out of her hand and she tried to hold it with awkward movements. The shooter sneered, reveling in his dominant position. Maria let go of the folder from her hands, and it slid along the smooth stones a little to the side, and the shooter followed it with his eyes. At that moment, Maria grabbed Eric's carbine, which was covered by a fallen bag, and began shooting at the man. He fell, but Maria jumped up and continued shooting without stopping until the magazine ran out. When the carbine fell silent, she approached the man and poked him with a smoking barrel. Several bullets stuck in the bulletproof vest, but several hit the neck and pelvis. There was a ringing in her ears. Fearing that other shooters might have heard their shootout, Maria began to gather hastily. It hurt her to leave Eric like that, but he would not forgive her if she did not save her life in exchange for his burial. Maria took Eric's bag and went to the exit. There was the body of the second shooter, whom King had torn apart. The dog was lying next to him. He was breathing. Maria took the carbine off her shoulder. She was disgusted by the fact that she would have to kill this dog, but it was the only way to free the poor animal from suffering. She pointed the weapon at King. He lifted his head, looked at her, and seemed to understand everything. He just laid his head down, as if saying, "Do what you need." Maria's hands trembled, and she lowered the carbine. She quickly applied a bandage to 2 bullet wounds. It seemed that the bullets went through. Somewhere deep in Maria's soul, she just didn't care if they killed her or not. She pulled an axe out of her bag, left things near King, and left the cave. After 20 minutes, she was already dragging the dog behind her on a cut branch. She was lucky there was no chase after her, and it seemed that besides these 2 shooters, no one else was hunting her. She found the car keys in one of their pockets. She assumed that the shooter's car would be located not far from the one they ran away from the hotel with Mike and then threw it near the road when they got lost and ran out of fuel. The night passed anxiously. Wrapped in polyethylene, Maria pressed herself into oblivion to the tree. King whimpered, but in the morning it seemed that he felt better. After a few hours of wandering and orienting by the compass, Maria was lucky to get back to her car. It scared her, as if it was a ghost from her past life, which was a complete deception. Wandering around, she found an SUV, covered with coniferous branches for camouflage. The engine started and Maria drove towards the dirt road. On the passenger seat lay the dog. Passing by her car, Maria realized that she remembered everything to the smallest detail, and it caused only one feeling in her, a burning with a furious fire in her chest desire for revenge.